In the earlier lessons, we talked about perception and then thinking. When we talked about it, we were trying to understand what was meant by perception, what do we do when we see or hear, and then we went on to the act of thinking. What does thinking actually mean? What do we do when we think? How do we improve our thinking? An activity which brings both perception and thinking together is reading. And reading is the foundation for most of our education. Our school systems are built around textbooks and writing on the board and exams which test your learning of what is being taught in the class. So, I want to think a little bit about reading and try and make sense of what reading could be. So, what is actually reading? What do you do when you read? First of all, when we read, we look at a page. And what is there on the page? We look at the words on the page. And the words, actually, if you look at the words, when I stare at the words in front of me, they actually look like little caterpillars. And I keep staring at them and I can see them almost as if they have become caterpillars. But the point I'm saying here is, first when you read, you see the words. So we can say that, first of all, reading is seeing. So you first have to see something. What you see are the words. And then you have to do something called reading. Now, if we say reading is seeing, then you could ask the question, is reading a book different from seeing a tree? Because after all, you also see the tree in front of you. Then can we say that we are reading a tree? When you look at a painting, you're seeing various parts in the painting. Then would you say you're trying to read the painting? We could say that you are reading a tree and the painting, but if we say that, what are we actually doing when you are reading? So let us say there is a word written in this book. Okay, let me look at a simple word, chair, C-H-A-I-R. That's a word. I read this word and then what happens to me? Because I first look at these alphabets, C-H-A-I-R, I find that they are put together. So I recognize that it is a word and I read the word. Then what happens? Now, one way to understand what happens is, let us say you look at another word and that word is spelled as H-Y-A-C-X. Some word, okay? H-Y-A-C-X. When you see that on the page, you can read that. Both the word C-H-A-I-R, chair, and this other funny word H-Y-A-C-X can both be seen, but you only read the word chair. You could also read the other word, but we say that no, I'm only reading the word chair. Why do you say that? In the first case, when you saw the word chair, you knew what it meant. Thus, we can say that reading is an attempt to make meaning of what we see. And this is something really remarkable. What is this thing called meaning? Because when I look at the word chair, the meaning is not added in that word. It is somewhere else. And I have to discover it when you read it. The act of reading is an attempt to make meaning of what we see. So whenever you see something and then say, oh, I know what it means, then you have actually done a reading. So when you look at a drawing and you say, I know what it means, then we can say that you have read the drawing. So when you look at a drawing of a cat and you immediately say, oh, this is a cat, that means you know the meaning of the drawing. Think about this question. Is the drawing of a cat different from the word C-A-T? So look at what we do. When I write the alphabets C-A-T together, you read it and say cat. And the moment you say cat, you say, oh, I know what it means. Cat means this particular kind of an animal. But when I look at a drawing of a cat, I do the same thing. I look at the drawing and say, oh, I know what it means. That's a cat. What is the difference between the word cat and the picture cat? And if you want to get really imaginative and have some fun with this, think about this question. Doesn't the word cat, C-A-T, also look like a drawing? If you really think about it, it is a drawing, right? You have drawn something on the sheet. It just looks like some alphabet C-A-T, but it is also a kind of a drawing. But this is the drawing of a cat which doesn't look like a cat. When I draw a cat, it looks like a cat. When I write the word C-A-T, it doesn't look like a cat, but it still means that you are talking about these creatures called cats. So it's actually very interesting. You can now think of different ways of drawing a cat, because the word C-A-T is also meaning or referring to a cat, just like the picture of a cat, and although it looks very different from a picture. So now can you think of different ways of drawing a cat? Look at how different languages use words for cat. Okay, so for example, if you have another word like Billy, which also stands for cat in Hindi, or Bekku, which stands for cat in Kannada, the words are different from C-A-T. C-A-T is only in English. Other languages have different words for cat. So each of those languages draws a different picture of a cat. Because writing C-A-T is one picture of a cat we saw earlier, right? Similarly, you write Billy or Bekku, then it's written differently. They're all different pictures. The easiest picture is to draw a picture which looks like a cat. That's your regular drawing. So, but you can see, therefore, that you can actually understand language in different ways. You can understand what the word is actually from different ways. Now, how do we know? So obviously now when you look at a word, you are searching for its meaning, or you think if you know what the word means, then you say, oh, now I know what the word means, so I understand what the word is. So how do you actually know what something means? What really is the meaning of a word? How did you know the word C-A-T stood for the meaning of a cat? And since I was saying reading is about knowing the meaning, could you say that all reading is just about knowing the meaning of the words? Is that all meaning is? Because remember, ask yourself, where do you find meanings of words? Remember, if when you're a child and you first learned to speak, you were taught new words. For example, you might have heard the word ball. And you'd be wondering, what does that sound, ball? Why are they saying ball? And then somebody will show you a ball. So what happens, every time they say ball, they will show you this object called the ball, and you keep thinking, well, maybe the sound they make, the word ball, is in some sense referring to the object ball. So there is a kind of a connection you make between the sound you hear and the object it stands for. So similarly, you know the meaning of the word chair when you are taught through pointing. So somebody would have said chair, and then they show you the chair, and you'll nod your head and say, oh, now I know. When I hear the sound chair, I realize they are actually talking about that object chair. We learn those words we learn by knowing what these words point to. That's our first simplest way of learning in our childhood. Now look at what happens. Suppose some child comes and asks you, what is the meaning of the word chair? How do you tell that child what the meaning of the word chair is? You yourself will point to the chair and say, oh, chair, oh, there it is. That is a chair. And you can actually talk about the chair in very many different ways, because then when you learn language, you can then say chair is an object which you can sit on. So at the first instance, when we first begin thinking about words, you could say the meaning of a word is nothing but the object it is pointing to.
The lesson you just heard was conducted by Professor Sundar Sarukkai. It is drawn from the book Philosophy for Children, Thinking, Reading and Writing by Sundar Sarukkai, published by Ektara Trust. Link to buy the book is in the video description below. This series is a production of Barefoot Philosophers, an initiative to bring philosophy to the public and children. For more information, visit our website at www.barefootphilosophers.com.